Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Katie Huff with Setting Yourself Free podcast, where people get to walk out the calling on their life to be set free from anything that is holding you back. And I am so excited that I have Dr. Troy Spurill out of Minneapolis. And he is an amazing man of faith and an amazing physician. And I was thrilled to be introduced to him because here's the raw answer to everything: is setting yourself free starts with having great health. And we're here to talk with you and share with you some of the things about Dr. Troy that you may not have thought about to improve your health and just your walk in what God's calling you to be, do, and have. So, Dr. Troy, I am so thrilled to have you here and have them get to know who is Dr. Troy and how did you get started, and let them know a little bit more about how you become this amazing physician that is changing people's lives.
Well, thanks for that introduction. I'll try and live up to it. No, I appreciate you having me on very much. And I'll just briefly jump into kind of what my goal is and our mission. On our wall, our mission statement literally says to become a worldwide agent of change in the fields of healthcare and human potential. And so we're here to just help people be the best version of themselves. And I really feel when we do that and we give God the glory, then we will actually impact people. Will be impactful. And one of the ways that we can be held down and kept down from doing the work that God has for us is being sick. Mm-hmm. So taking care of our temple is really, really important. So I'm going to give you the 60-second version of 30 years of experience.
Perfect.
All right. So basically, the way we're made and created, we have a mental, chemical, and physical component to our flesh, and then there's a spiritual component. And so there's body, mind, and soul. And God created us, and God can perform a miracle at any time because our spirit basically can override and do anything with our mental, chemical, and physical states. However, not everyone gets a miracle because that would only prove that God is God. And God doesn't need to prove that to anyone.
That's right.
So we're allowed and we're privileged to walk out suffering, if you will. Because unfortunately, when we do suffer, that's when people tend to go to God. Yeah. And that's what God wants. So my role here on this planet this time is to really help people identify and answer the question of why are you suffering? And so we want to just kind of put it in simple terms. God designed us to heal. He really did.
Right.
When there's a breakdown in communication, that leads to dysfunction, and then dysfunction leads to disease. Our current healthcare system in the United States is a disease management model. They wait till you have a disease, right, and then they try and manage that disease with drugs or surgery. Now, and I'm not beating up on the doctors and nurses. My family are full of doctors and nurses, and some of my best friends. I'm just saying the system itself is geared towards more of a reactionary response. And what I'm talking about is more of a proactive response. In functional medicine, you're looking to measure dysfunction before it becomes disease.
Which is awesome, because it's like putting, what do you put before the cart, the horse, or yes, you put the cart before the horse. And it's like, instead of putting, reactive, like you said, you're being proactive, which is so huge. And obviously, I, as a Christian woman and a registered nurse, I mean, it's like, God is the great physician and healer, but he uses us, obviously, to be able to support those that need a lot more support. And I'm sure you would agree with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We it's amazing what people are capable of when you remove some of these barriers. Right. And when you actually improve their health, all of a sudden, people who were in the darkness of the valley are now leading the charge and leading the way in all shapes and forms. It could be just being all of a sudden the head of the household. It could be taking care of the kids to allow them to be guided in a certain way. It could be starting your own company. It could be all kinds of different things where all of a sudden you're influencing people in a way that you're lifting them up. You're pouring into them. It's just a different way of living.
Absolutely. And I wanted to just encourage you to share with the audience the story that you told me, because it sounds like you were pretty much comfortable in your practice, and you kind of had a knock on the door where you were awoken up by a message. And I'm
Yes.
sure people would love to hear how this all came to Synapse, which is kind of unique that you named your practice Synapse.
Yeah, the synapse is basically like the junction between where the nerves are in the brain. So in my mind, one of the keys to health is communication, and the synapse is the junction where communication occurs in the brain. So that's why I named the clinic Synapse. And anyone, if you want to just see what dysfunction looks like, just if there's a breakdown in communication between your brain and your body, that's going to be dysfunction. But if there's a communication breakdown between spouse and spouse,
Yeah,
that's also going to lead to dysfunction.
right.
And so same thing between yourself and God. So we have to stay communicating to be healthy. And it was many years ago, over 10 years ago, probably 12 at this point, where God put on my heart that he wanted me to build a functional medicine clinic. And so it just kept gnawing at me. And I'll tell you, I wrestled with this for 2 years because my wife and I, we have a lot going on in our life. I had a full practice. I wasn't working full time. It was enough to make enough to pay the bills, but have a nice balanced lifestyle. And so I was working 2.5, 3 days a week at the clinic, and then had some days off. We have 10 children and 16 grandchildren. So we've got a lot of blessings. And so there's a lot there.
You beat the Waltons, Dr. Troy.
Yes, very competitive. And so I wrestled with the clinic, and I went back to my wife and I said, God's telling me to build a functional medicine clinic. And she said, no, we need to simplify, which I agreed with and wanted. So after 2 years of this, I finally said, okay, God, you need to make it so obvious that I get hit over the head with knowing that it was you, that's you talking to me, and you want me to do this. And it was at that time, there was a patient that came in, and some of your listeners may know of her, but her name is Susie Larson, and she is a very well-known Christian radio show host and author. She's written, I think, over 12 books, and she came in as a patient, and she's shared this testimony, so I can talk about her with this. And she had a kind of a miraculous turnaround, and so she asked me to come on her radio show and just talk about what we did and everything. And I was on the show, and after the show, the phone kept ringing for a couple hours, and people were asking questions about their health and everything. So she called me on my drive home and said, you have to come back next month, and you need to build a functional medicine clinic for God's people, is her exact words, which is pretty much what I had been hearing. So she was the hammer that God used to say, okay, let's do this. And so I went from a small little space, and we now have a 6,000 square foot facility with medical doctors, nurse practitioners, chiropractors, nutritionists, health coaches. We pray with our patients, do IVs. We have patients from 50 different states and 12 different countries. And so it just kind of blew up in a good way. And then God prepared us for COVID in a way where he basically allowed us to work with people, and now at this point start teaching people a little bit about health and wellness, and how to even prevent things like COVID and other serious health related problems that can kind of sneak up and get you there. So God's been working on me for a while. I'm a little stubborn. It took me a bit. I'm just going to mention that you probably shouldn't argue with God. And so,
Right.
but my life was comfortable. It was good. I was enjoying it. I was relaxed.
Yeah. And so are you saying you're uptight now, or you're just now driving a
No,
bus down the road, right?
I feel amazing. So I feel an energy that only comes from the Holy Spirit, only comes from God. I am being driven. It's not me, but I have an energy where I almost feel like I'm floating as I'm going through my days right now, but it is 120 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And so it's very fast paced. It's a lot of everything coming from all different angles, and I love it.
Yeah.
So I don't know how else to say it. I'm doing the work that I was brought to this earth to do. I feel like that.
Yeah, so you've been set free to be, do, and have all that God
Yes.
created you, right?
Absolutely. But I'll say this, it took knowing who my identity in Christ was to allow that to happen because I was fighting it. I hope that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it does to me, and I hope the audience. I'm pretty sure the audience is catching on. If they don't get it, they will eventually because they will have that wake up prayerfully as well. And I always say, what God brings us to, He brings us through, and so we don't have to lean on our own strength. That's what the word says. Is I can do all things through Jesus who gives me strength. So that is awesome. Just how that was kind of like this nice little flower that was a tight rose, and then all of a sudden it bloomed, and you have this amazing practice. And I was so impressed, and you might want to share with all that, and you kind of did with the different areas of support that you give. I mean, I being a registered nurse, I saw that you have a nurse practitioner there, and a number of chiropractors, and just what your heart is all about when it comes to serving.
Yeah, so when we look at people, we physically assess them to see if things are physically aligned properly, with the intention of helping people get out of pain, because sometimes pain can cause poor decisions, and then also disrupt sleep. But really, a lot of our physical resetting of the body through with our chiropractors and exercise is to actually help with sleep disorders. The majority of people have sleep disorders, and when you don't sleep properly, you don't rejuvenate each and every night. That's the restoration God had in us. So you can actually, as a child, fall down the steps, get all bruised, and then wake up the next day feeling pretty good. It's your immune system that gets that signal when you get into that deep sleep that goes in and cleans everything up.
Mm-hmm.
As we age, we start to lose that. So we check people physically, we check them for specific sleep disorders. And then lab work, we do just a whole bunch of lab work to not look and see if you have a disease. We'll definitely catch that. But we look for the patterns in the blood work. So you can actually start to see diabetes or rheumatoid arthritis or many other of these degenerative diseases years before they even become a problem.
Wow.
So you can actually see them in the lab work. You can see them with a sleep disorder. So what we're restoring is their foundations that way. And then we actually check things emotionally as well. And I think maybe your listeners will like this too, because my other big thing that happened as far as how God just kind of poured into me was when, this is 14 years ago, I got a call from Afghanistan, and it was a patient who was the wife of a patient, future patient, and he was a soldier who had run into a tent, knocked himself out, got a concussion, and was recovering in the sick bay there when he found out back home that his newborn baby son may not make it through the night.
Oh wow.
The next day, with that physical trauma and then emotional trauma, he woke up frozen stiff. He had locked in syndrome.
Mm.
He'd been in that state for a year when they called me. He had not been able to move. He could shuffle, things like that, but his muscles were so stiff. And so as mentioned to the wife, I thought it would be an area of the brain called the basal ganglia. Happens to be my favorite area of the brain because everyone's got a favorite area of the brain. Basal ganglia sets the tone for muscles and emotions. It's why when you have stress, your muscles get tight. And so I said, it's going to be hyperactive. And the doctors were on the phone too, and they laughed at me. But I just had her pick up the phone privately. And I said, get a PET scan. If I'm right, it'll show hyperactive basal ganglia. And I didn't think anything of it. I went back to seeing patients. And a year later, we got a call from Germany. My staff came in and said, it's a call from Germany. And do you want to take it? And I said, sure. And it was his wife again. And she said, they thought you were crazy. They thought it was some type of chemical warfare. But they did a PET scan last week and it showed hyperactive basal ganglia. So the Army wants to send them to your facility. And that's when I said to myself, I said, well, I knew what area of the brain it was. It doesn't mean I knew how to fix it or help it. And so when I get stuck, I ask a better question.
Mm.
So I sat down and the next day and I prayed. Actually, I wasn't sitting down. I was in the shower and I was praying. And it was the first time I ever prayed about a patient and got an instant answer.
Wow.
just a download of what to do and what part of the brain to check. And when I did that, when he came into the clinic, all of a sudden he started moving his little finger, and all it was mentioning this area of the brain, check it, don't stop. That was it. That was the message essentially. And so I just kept on checking that area of the brain, and he started moving his fingers and everything. Short version of the story is after 4 to 5 hours, he jumped up off the table and walked out of the room. First time he had done that in 2 years. And so
Wow.
we were all crying and we were hugging and stuff, and it was just an amazing turnaround. And so what ended up happening was there's an emotional component. And so God kind of helped me create what we call a neuromuscular reeducation to help the physical consequences of trauma, of stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a physical way to kind of release the brakes when it comes to that. So just like a lot of people are kind of stuck in life, they can't literally get up off the couch because their own brain is suppressing them. And this kind of lifts that suppression off. So we check that to see how many people have that and they're walking around with it. And it turns out 95% of a healthy population are. So we check that mental component with a physical component, with the biochemical component of diet and lab work. And when you start to restore that foundation that God created us with, all of a sudden things start to work better. And the biggest thing we see is the majority of people come in what we call a fight or flight state.
Right.
And remember, if you're in fight or flight, you can't be in rest or digest. That they're the same part of the brain. You have to be in one or the other. Because if a tiger's chasing you, that's fight or flight. And if a tiger's chasing you, that's a horrible time to take a nap or eat lunch, right? Your brain doesn't support those areas.
No.
So people end up with sleep disorders and digestive dysfunction because they're chronically in fight or flight.
Right.
So what we do is we assess that mental, chemical, and physical, and then we get them, then we lean in and say, if they're Christian, we say, are you applying Christian principles? Meaning, are you forgiving? Because we have seen a lack of forgiveness blocks healing. Are you full of gratitude? Because that promotes healing. So it's all about applying the faith. There's an action step we have to have. So when you get the foundational principles and then the spiritual principles right, you start to see these miraculous healings.
Like we said, he's a great physician and healer, and he uses people like you to put the puzzle pieces together so you can have these incredible results and testimonies of people being healed and being set free.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
No wonder you're on a higher playing field of energy and excitement to see all of the lives that you get to change and be a part of and make a difference in people's lives, which is so huge. And I'm sure because of where you live, that you've experienced some things from 2020 and what was going on in that time zone compared to where we are today, and what even possibly 2024 looks like, because we've had certain individuals say that there could be another pandemic.
Yeah. So 2020 was very interesting. And so I'm going to summarize it with many people have said this in the past, but it was definitely a mess that's becoming a message for me. So 2020 was a revolutionary time because we didn't know what was going on like everyone else, and we assessed it. I have a full-time researcher on staff here, and we were discerning through a lot of the science and literature. And for your listeners, I have two baskets and two filters. Everything goes through my filter of faith and then my filter of science. And so we were assessing the science, and I'd bring it to him and I'd say, are you seeing this the way I'm seeing this as far as what was being said? And it was only about, I think it was after the second time I heard Dr. Fauci start talking about the research that was coming out that I disagreed. I'm just going to say it that way. I did not interpret the research the same way he did. And so we just started looking for answers, and not just going with what the CDC and the NIH were saying. So the short version of the story is we felt very comfortable. We knew how to treat it, and even more so how to prevent it as the information was coming out. And I guess the short version of the story is we became an underground clinic for treating COVID for a lot of the local doctors here that did not agree with how their hospitals were treating active COVID. So we wanted people to get early treatment. We used ivermectin. We didn't need hydroxychloroquine as much. That was the first one that kind of came out. We did use ivermectin. We used anti-inflammatories and anticoagulants. And then eventually we saw some research that showed if you nebulized iodine in the nasal cavity, it decreased the spread by 94%, which means you wouldn't be passing it on to everyone. So this information should have been brought out to the public. And I remember very early on in 2020, I saw an ER doctor when we were trying to figure out what was going on. There was an ER doctor out in New York who came on YouTube and said, I'm seeing what's going on here. It reminds me of altitude sickness. Don't put people on vents. And then I saw his YouTube video get pulled. I remember thinking, well, that's really weird that they would pull that. He's an ER doctor, very credible guy. He ended up being right. And if we had listened to him, it would have saved a lot of lives. And my wife, who is a respiratory therapist, she was the one that was putting people on vents. She left the hospital in 2020 and came to work at our clinic because of what she saw and experienced. And I don't want to talk ill of a lot of medical doctors and nurses. I have many of them are really good friends. They know where I stand because I was pretty vocal about stuff. But for the first time in my career, I started getting attacked for just questioning certain things. And I wanted what we were doing to be scrutinized because I believe that truth will always hold up to scrutiny. It will always hold up to scrutiny. So we can't not look at stuff. So people who disagree with something, that's great. Let's talk about it. And then for the first time, no one would talk about it. It was bizarre. So we very successfully treated COVID very differently than what we'd call the mainstream, and very successfully. And we had people in their 80s driving from Ohio overnight through the night to get to our clinic who were unconscious, that we had to basically resuscitate, get on IVs and help because they refused to go to the hospital because they didn't trust the hospital system. The hospital system during this time lost the trust of many people. And so it was, and that's hard for them to hear because they busted their butt. A lot of nurses and doctors are burnt out now because of what they went through.
Exactly.
But if early treatment and our protocol had been established and given to them, it would have prevented the severe consequences that these nurses and doctors then had to deal with, because they're getting people at the end stage of a very hyper-inflammatory state. Much, much harder to help those people. So my heart goes out to a lot of the nurses and doctors because they were very much influenced by decision makers who weren't looking at the research. And I was very, very fortunate early on too to meet and have lunch with Dr. Peter McCullough, who the day before he testified before Congress went through all of his research, but he was there at the first meeting with the CDC and the NIH. There was 4 people at the table. He was one of them. And he privately expressed how he was shocked at how it was like deer in headlights. They had no clue what he was talking about. And it was very obvious. They just wanted a program for vaccines. They didn't want any other solution. And he came with a solution. And he ended up using his hypothesis in 3 different studies in different countries. And he was right. So, and he is a very smart man who looked at the past research and developed a strategy. So we used people like Dr. McCullough, Pierre Corey, Master John is one that PhD out of New York, who I just love how he discerns information. And so we used a lot of these people. I want to give a little shout out to Ivor Cummings, my favorite Irish statistician, and just how he dissected the information. It helps because I have a specialty. I look at information. I cannot go through a spreadsheet and of information and pull out data like these guys can. They're brilliant. God equipped so many people, so you just had to know where to look and to keep looking. And so that's what we did, and we got a lot of flack, but we kind of went under the radar for a lot of it, and helped a lot of people during that tough time.
Yeah. There's, it's just all the mandates that were required is kind of crazy. And you just have to stop and pause as a medical professional and go, there's something really wrong with this picture where they're mandating people that to even be able to work, that they had to have the vaccine. And I had nurses, crying and asking me, what do I do? And I was saying, you need to pray, but more importantly, stand your ground. And God will provide another answer, another way of income, because it was just like, how do I work in this environment, maintain my, integrity to my own desire for my own health and my own family, and yet still be able to make an income. So it was
very, very challenging time for people. Yeah.
Crazy time. Thank God we're over the hump, but there's always something, it seems like it's percolating. So I would ask you this. So if you wanted the audience to know the most important thing about Synapse and Dr. Spurill and your team, what would you want people to take away from Synapse and who you are and what you do?
Well, the first thing is just know that I am very obedient to God. So people always ask me, what is my mission, my vision? My vision is to have a new healthcare system, a new healthcare system model. I'll always fight for that unless God tells me to stand down. So my first step is just being obedient. And who we are, I have surrounded myself with people who are very, very intelligent and also just servant leaders. And so our goal is to just get good at what we do, which is to help people get better and to help problem solve. I will also say this, one of the blessings that's come from COVID is a lot of the medical professionals kind of got dismayed with what was going on. And even recently, I have one of the top trauma surgeons in the state just reach out to have a fellowship with us to learn functional medicine. He's going to be here for a year to learn functional medicine to see if it improves the outcomes or prevents surgeries. So all of a sudden, we've got this blending happening of the traditional Western model and functional medicine. And so I believe Synapse is positioned to be a model for that, a template for the future, what healthcare can be. And so we're always looking at getting better, being better, but at the same time, restoring the foundational aspects for people. It does require a lot more work for people. I'm going to say it that way, because we work on your lifestyle. Look at, what are you eating that might not be working for you? We look at what are you putting in your body that might not be working for you, and what does your body actually need? We look at what does guard your thoughts actually mean for you. We look at all the different things that self-condemnation and lack of forgiveness might actually be contributing to the blocking of a healing that God has for you. And one of the things I'll throw out this gem for some of your listeners here. You can tell if you're blocking your own recovery if you ever hear yourself say an excuse. An excuse is nothing more than a reason wrapped in the skin of a lie. I got that from one of the pastors that I followed early on, Pastor Greg Locke.
You need to say that again. An excuse.
Say that again. An excuse is nothing more than a reason wrapped in the skin of a lie. And when there's a lie we believe, a lie is from Satan, it's not from God. And when we believe lies, it actually causes disease to permeate through our body because it blocks healing.
Yes.
It doesn't happen overnight. So identifying the lies that we believe is another way to set you free. And when you take 100% responsibility for your health, for your choices, and for your life, it kind of circumvents all those lies so you don't believe them. So then you can start moving through and you start to see a healing process.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's good. Yes, it's great.
Yeah.
So
that's who we are.
Well, and it's like it comes back to, and I've always said this as a nurse that even worked in mental health at times, that's what it starts with, is what you think about comes about.
Yes.
A lot of it. And I'm not saying that mental health, like the paranoid schizophrenics and things like that, I'm not saying that those aren't real, and that, most people would be hopefully thinking, well, geez, that's not, they're insulted by saying what you think about comes about, so you need to guard your mind. But it even says guard your heart and mind in the Bible. And so it's just like, I can tell you this, I had a situation, and my nephew, who is an amazing young man, had a femoral fracture, and he's a football player and a track star and all this. And I'll tell you, doctor, it was like, it just, when my brother called me and the radiologist had said that he had this stress fracture, but it also could be cancer, I immediately said, that's a lie from the pit of hell. It is not true. That is, the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I just went on this rant, and my brother's just like, whoa. And I was like, I'm standing on that. And I mean, I started just reaching out to all of my prayer warriors, and everyone started praying. And we just got the news yesterday that the PET scan said he is cancer free.
Hey, amen.
Right?
Yes.
So
that's what our healthcare system should be. So we stand in faith, we apply our faith, and then for us within the healthcare system, we assess the flesh basically, and we look for different things. But the thing is, healing can occur whether we find it in the flesh or not. That's definitely a possibility, and we see miracles all the time. We see that all the time. And so that is definitely there. And so assessing the flesh while standing in faith, that's okay too. We have many patients who walk through that, and what they uncover in the process is the real healing. The self-condemnation, the importance, not just for them but their family, at just lowering their inflammation, or that, I'm just going to say this way: if God, when it comes to our food, if God made it, it's good. If man changed it, just beware.
Right.
Have changed food, and a lot of it causes inflammation, which then takes us down to not operate optimally. Right. And so assessing the flesh while continuing to strive for that righteousness, knowing we're going to fall short, but we want to strive for it. And then all that leads to is just increased gratitude for God for sending Jesus to cover the gap, right? So it's just I don't know. For me, it's just a great way to live life, even when you're suffering.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to just ask one last question before we close out, because this has just been absolutely a blessing, amazing information. And I want you to have, Dr. Troy, the opportunity to tell people, when the day is done, what do you hope that people will remember about Dr. Troy? What will you be known for?
Oh, I love Jesus. I love people. I want to see people be healed. I want you to know there's an answer for every problem. God would not have up without down. He would not have a problem without a solution. So I want you to have hope. And I want you to know that even if it's not through Synapse, that God has a healing for you, that God has an answer for you. And you want to just pour into your relationship with God, and he will direct you. You really will. For those people that really want to find out about who we are, we do have a lot of media on our website. So you can go to officialsynapse.com. And if you have questions about what we do, you can click. There's a little button there that says free discovery call. There's no charge, and you basically just we collect your information, and we sit down and walk you through the process of how to be healthier, what we do here, that type of thing. And so I hope that people also know that we love to educate. So we have media podcasts where we talk about all kinds of disorders, from thyroid disorders to everything else. So check those out. And 7 years I've been on Faith Radio speaking health and wellness. So you can catch those radio shows as well. So I don't know. I love God, love people, but I want to see the best versions of people come out as much as possible. So that's where our heart is, and that's what we like to do here.
That's absolutely amazing. And what a blessing you are to all of us. And I want to make sure everybody knows where to watch this podcast, which is Setting Yourself Free with Katie Huff Ministries. And please go to YouTube and subscribe to Katie Huff Ministries. Also go to Facebook, Apple, Rumble, Spotify, Instagram, Twitter. We're on everything. We want to make sure that you get this message, and that you will also be set free by having a health and wellness in your life. And I'm so grateful and thankful for Dr. Troy and Synapse and what they're doing. And I can't wait to have you back. And I just want to say thank you for the heart to serve and just doing all that you can to do and have what God called you to be and make a difference in their life. Your legacy will live on forever, Dr. Troy. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Katie Huff with Katie Huff Ministries, and this is Bella Jean, and we're coming to you today to talk to you about setting yourself free by having first a great night's sleep. How's that going to happen? By using My Pillow. My Pillow has incredible products. Bella Jean even has her own dog bed and loves it. She sleeps well at night, so do we. Because we also have the topper, we have the pillows, we've used the sheets, we have the towels, and we even have the slippers. So we are a family that loves My Pillow as much as my Bella Jean, and I'm hoping that your dog will love it as much as ours, and that you'll go to mypillow.com/unmasked. Again, that's mypillow.com/unmasked. And you'll get incredible discounts for your family to be setting themselves free to having a great night's sleep and having an amazing holiday season with My Pillow products. Thank you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Katie Huff with Katie Huff Ministries, and I'm coming to talk to you today about setting yourself free. And what that means is it begins with taking control of your finances. So I was unfortunately introduced to a number of different financial planners that really didn't put me before their profit. And I'm glad to say that Kirk Elliott, PhD, their philosophy is people over profits. They don't rush you. They have a holistic approach. They took my SEP, they invested it into gold and silver, which obviously is diversifying. It may be for you, it may not, but I will tell you this, KirkElliottPhD.com/unmasked, they will go beyond making you comfortable and knowing where your money's going. And so I would just say, take control of your finances. Go to KirkElliottPhD/unmasked for a discount and great advice and peace of mind that you'll have.